Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this multilingual English learner educator spotlight. We have today with us Irina Mills. You want to say hi, Irina?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Yes, you're welcome. So Irina is from the Great Falls district, and she's going to talk today specifically about the L committees. And if you have been thinking about starting a committee in your school, I think we're going to try to have all kinds of information so that you can think of the details of what it might take to do this at your district. So Irina is coming from Great Falls, and you can see it there on the map just to place ourselves geographically. You want to say anything about this map, Irina?
So Great Falls Public Schools is located in the Golden Triangle in the heart of Montana, and we have about 10,000 students in our district. And what's interesting pertaining to ELs is that we have the largest population of American Indian English learners off the reservation. So we have the largest urban population of American Indians in Great Falls Public Schools, which is very important because that fact impacted the creation of the EL committee many years ago. This EL committee is 11 years old now. So it was actually created 1 year before I started this job 10 years ago, and it's going strong. So we are proud to share some information with you about what we do here in Great Falls, and hopefully I'll help you get started with your committee or something similar.
Yes, that's what we're hoping. So more specific numbers, just so you guys get a sense of Great Falls. This is data from, just to make sure you're noticing, from 2019, 2020. It's the most current numbers that we're using that we have from the Access data. Irina, what do you think might be interesting to point out about this graph?
We certainly have a lot of ELLs in the middle of this bell curve,
Yeah.
as you can tell, and a lot of elementary ELs. But what's interesting, and we will talk about, the subgroups of ELs. We have, roughly 100 ESL students who, come from a second language background in our schools. And that number has stayed about 100 students a year. But the biggest number of our students are Native American ELs. And that's how we get to 450, and that's a big number. One thing that we noticed over the years is that our ESL students who are Hispanic and Latino on this in this table, or who have two or more races, they tend to acquire academic English within the expected time frame of 5 to 7 years. And every year when we look at the access scores and students who are ready for exit, we typically see an equal number. We're finally to the equal number. For years, it was more ESL students exiting the program than American Indian students exiting the program. Now we're finally getting to about equal number. But we also know that the ESL students and Native American ELs are represented disproportionately in our schools. We have 54% of American Indian ELs in our schools, and they typically do not exit our program in that expected time frame. So we have a lot of long-term ELs within that subgroup, and we needed to change this. This fact has not changed in the last 10 years. We are slowly tipping the scale, okay? But still there's a lot of work to be done. And that is part of the reason why Great Falls Public Schools created the committee.
So that's a great little segue to my questions that were kind of regarding just the background and how it was created. And do you want to maybe tell us a little bit more details of what you know of how it came about, and maybe who led it and how many people it took, to get this kind of going 11 years ago, you said?
Right. Yeah. So I started on this job 10 years ago, and the year prior, the director of federal programs in Great Falls Public Schools, Sally Mathers, looked at EL data and probably saw similar numbers. You know, we at the time we actually had a very few ESL students in Great Falls Public Schools. When I started the job, we had around 20. Now we have 100. Okay, but the numbers for American Indian ELs were pretty similar, and she noticed that we have a large percentage of students who are not passing the test. They are not making meaningful gains. So at the time, the Great Falls Public Schools District didn't even have an ESL teacher. So her rationale was we needed to get that information out to schools on a consistent basis so that schools pay closer attention to the needs of American Indian students and ESL students too. But at the time we had way more American Indian students. So the decision came from top down, actually. Okay.
Okay.
She talked to principals, and she was the one who set it up that each school will have a representative that would attend a monthly committee meeting. And, we just kind of rolled from there. Before I started leading the committee, which probably happened about 3 years ago, Carol Paul, our title coordinator, did a lot of planning and coordinating the committee work. So a lot of the information that is presented at the committee meetings comes from, the district level leadership team. But as the best and the most productive meetings are based on engagement and conversation sharing and ideas coming from multiple stakeholders. So that is the most important thing that I think helps us bring people back meeting after meeting. We always save a good amount of time for people to interact and talk and, share their
Connect.
experiences, because it's always most memorable when people can share from school to school what their experiences are and how they're addressing issues and
Yes, I think those are some of the
what their
most,
celebrations may be.
yeah, exactly. The connections, people doing the same things you're
Mhm.
doing on a daily basis. So as far as just the background for the committee, what do you think, even though you weren't there when it was created, what do you think might have been some of the challenges that
Mhm.
people ran across when trying to start it?
Well, I think you have to have pretty good commitment from administration, you know, and I think we're finally to the point where we have that in Great Falls Public Schools, but uh, it would definitely be a challenge at the beginning because, it will be seen as one extra thing,
Yeah.
and particularly like this year, it's very hard to add an extra duty
Yeah.
to, anybody's plate. So I would definitely consider that when starting the committee. Another thing that helps us not to be seen as, this add-on, another responsibility and no gain, is we pay people to attend the committee meetings. Since those meetings take place outside of the duty day, we use our Title III funds to pay people for their time, which amounts to $10 to $20, depending on whether a teacher is a secondary or elementary. And we um, so like this year, we're not meeting in person, and most of our meetings take place on Zoom. But
Mhm.
because it's been a crazy year, we allow some flexibility with how people can learn the information that is being presented at the committee. So if they can't attend the Zoom meeting, there's a makeup assignment in Google Classroom that I post that they can do to show that they still got the information and are ready to pass it on to teachers at their school. So this year we have flexed quite a bit as
Yeah.
far as attendance goes. However, on a regular year, we do stress the importance of regular attendance at the committee meetings. And that's where it's nice to have principal support. We
Yes.
check in with principals when certain schools are, go without being represented for a few months. We
Hmm.
ask, if, why they might be absent from committee meetings and follow up with the principal. And typically, if a staff member, has too much going on, or, they have other duties, there are lots of things that can happen. A principal nominates somebody else. It is also an expectation at our committee that if a committee member is not able to attend, they just send a sub,
Okay.
a colleague essentially from their school who will go in their place and will get paid. And they take that information back to them.
Okay. Um, I think that was the detail before when we had talked about this, that there's payment, and I almost think sometimes it's symbolic, even if it's not a whole
Mhm.
bunch of just respecting people's time. So some of these questions now, I want to sort of talk more about the details of what it looks like, when you're planning your meetings. And I was
Mhm.
curious, when you kind of invite people to, I'm assuming it's somewhat voluntary, right? When you're reaching
Mhm.
out to people to be in the committee, are you, do you kind of open it to anybody who is in contact with else, from teachers to counselors? How do you navigate who is going to
Yeah.
be involved in the committee?
Absolutely. We start with the willing, honestly. And when we reach out to principals, principals have usually a good picture of who might be a good fit
Yeah.
for a committee such as this in their building. And, we see a lot of counselors on our committee, okay, or through the years we've seen, because had we've had turnover, which is good. We look
Yeah.
at it as a good thing. So we've had counselors, a lot of literacy teachers. We have some literacy teachers who have stayed on the committee since its inception. And we have classroom teachers. We have, I think the only thing, we have admin interns sometimes, but we do
Um,
try to avoid inviting administration. It's mostly, teachers or
yeah.
specialists. We've had speech pathologists as well who have
Very cool.
showed interest in joining our committee voluntarily. So that's wonderful. And we always include one person, or our Indian Ed department. So they always send one person from their department to, kind of talk about the needs of American Indian ELs, or
Hmm.
at least, when we present or we discuss any issues, they offer that take through their lens. So it's very valuable to have their presence at committee meetings. Like I said, over the years, we've had quite a bit of turnover, and we think it's a really good thing because,
Yeah.
every couple of years, we start to talk about, the same issues, and we
Hmm.
want to share the wealth and the
Yes.
knowledge with as many people as we possibly can across the district. Because if a few people from the school have been on the committee for a while, that really builds their understanding of ELs at that school.
Yeah, that's great. That answers a lot of questions in one. And I want to make sure I'm looking at all these points. Okay, so when you, right now, I'm kind of assuming you're the only one that's in charge of coming up with the agenda items and
Mm-hmm.
running um, the monthly meetings. Can you talk me through how kind of that looks like for you? How do you decide, and do you let people weigh in on what you're going to talk about? And does
Mm-hmm.
someone take minutes maybe that you
Mm-hmm.
also share? Like, how do you distribute all those? I think it's a lot of responsibility to keep people engaged, because it has to be
Right.
organized. And there has to be almost like even have like a plan for it to feel worthwhile.
Absolutely. And so our committee meetings are 45 minutes long. That's one thing I
Okay.
didn't share. So we meet monthly from 3:45 to 4:30. Okay. And it seems like a perfect length for our committee where we can, we really don't want to keep people after school for
Yeah.
a long period of time where people will get fatigued, but we want to have enough time to share important information and maybe engage them in some sort of discussion. um, so over the years we've come up with this formula for
Oh,
success. Okay. For agenda. So we always share a piece of information about ELs. It could be identification of ELs, it could be monitoring, but it has to be brief. Okay. And like this year, I'm using the information from the guidance to district document. Okay. So we're all on the same page. So I'll just take a page or a little chunk and we will discuss that. We always talk about numbers and dates so that those numbers of students are at the forefront of people's thinking. Okay. It is important that people see how many Native American ELs we have. Okay.
hmm.
It's important that people see that we have a growing number of ESL students. Okay. It's a good reminder every month. Um,
Yeah.
then we talk about dates, like it could be access testing related or when we get score reports, because when EL committee members get approached with questions at their school, they will have some information to respond with. Okay.
Yeah.
And then the most important piece, here we are, is a strategy. Okay. That is
Mm.
something that I started doing a couple of years ago. Every single committee meeting has a strategy uh, that supports ELs in the classroom. Okay. And it could be a strategy focused on vocabulary or speaking, or, a resource or a strategy keeps teachers happy. That's what they come for. And when we include a strategy, I highlight it, we talk about it, and we practice it. It's kind of harder this year, but we're still
Yeah.
trying. But usually when we meet in person, the strategy is interactive, where they get a chance to talk to each other, ask each other questions, listen, discuss, right? Everything that we want to our ELs to experience in the classroom. So
Wow.
that's the hook.
That's your
That's why they keep coming back, or
yeah.
they're not, grumpy.
Yeah. And it's organized enough so that it's very predictable, which
Hmm.
is like really sometimes what makes people feel like they're part of something organized and they
Hmm.
want to be a part of it.
Yes. And at the end of the year, we have one special meeting like in May that is always the same.
Okay.
In May, we look at the score reports, access score reports, because they typically, not this year they will come out later, but typically they come out in mid-April. And
Mhm.
by our May meeting, we're able to sort them by school, we'll run copies, and we ask our committee members to look at the students from their school and analyze them. Um, look at the students who are proficient and are ready for exit. Look for students who are making growth in certain areas and think about why, or students who are not making growth and think about, plans for next year and things like that. So we actually have them look through their numbers and kind of, reflect on how the year went. This year we'll have to come up with something different because the reports are coming like in June. So
Yes. Yes.
yeah,
And the numbers this year are
yeah.
hard to interpret anyway. I
Right.
was just gonna ask you that. I'm glad you touched on it because I really have only two big questions, and then you can end with anything you think might help
Mhm.
people. But I was curious because there's so many different kind of stakeholders at these committees. If you were able to do things like you said, where you're taking the time to look at monitoring and how students are they either getting stuck or are they becoming long-term
Mhm.
Ls, or just kind of preventative um, discussions where you could set up goals for them. Because I've been making these modules. So I'm gonna plug the modules for schools who might be starting from zero, or for schools who might need to um, maybe look at their programs they have in place in order to create changes or
Mhm.
to make modifications if something isn't working. And in one of those modules, I talk about creating a committee where you would essentially look at the program that's in place and talk about if it's working, or if it needs to be modified. So I'm
Mhm.
curious if that ever, because it's a huge topic that sometimes it has to be limited to specific stakeholders for it to be effective. Has
Mhm.
your committee ever been able to address that kind of bigger discussion
Mhm.
of the programming? Yeah.
Yes. Um, it actually happened a couple of years ago, and Carol Paul was leading it at the time.
Okay.
Um, I can't remember exactly where she got the information, but I remember we looked at like um, 10 different aspects of an effective EL program.
Okay.
And our EL committee, actually, we did a lot of self-evaluation of how
Mm,
we're doing as a district, on each of those parameters. And we did it, at the beginning of the year, and then we did a mid-year, and then we did a end of the year. And I would say that, the people who have been serving on this EL committee, and we have a mix, of
mhm.
established members and some new members. But I would say that people are very reflective, and
Yeah.
um, it's uh, I think that self-assessment really reflects what we see in our schools day to day.
Mhm.
So it was very, very good work, on behalf of those committee members, and it sends us a good message on what we need to work on.
Yeah.
They also keep us in check, because sometimes we may feel differently. Our self-assessment of how things are going may look differently from what they see. So it's important to have their perspectives,
Yeah.
and they're so varied. We have committee members who come from the preschool level, and
Mhm.
we have all the way to post-secondary, because one of our committee members works with EL parents at
Oh.
the adult ed program. So she teaches an adult ESL class. So we really have the gamut. So it's really,
Yeah.
really nice to have people from, so many different backgrounds with the same
Yeah.
purpose.
No, that's incredible. And how many people do you think come together about?
About 25 people on
Yeah,
average.
that's
For
incredible.
a live meeting, it's a little difficult on Zoom, but we've been averaging, I would say 17, 18 people
Yeah. Hmm.
month to month. So,
That's a good
and
number.
yeah, I think, well, we've been doing okay. One piece of advice I would like to give you.
Yes. Yes, that's
If
what I
you're
was gonna ask.
starting a committee,
Hmm.
I would definitely secure support from your administration, and you can use the data to drive that discussion with administration. I would
Hmm.
use, the table such as this,
Hmm.
to talk about the numbers of ELs. I would use the data from the access test to see if our ELs making the gains or not,
Hmm.
because in Montana we don't have enough staff that have EL credentials,
Hmm.
and yet we have large numbers of ELs in some circumstances, especially Native American students. So an EL committee can help spread the knowledge and spread the understanding. And then once you've looked at it, commit to it.
Yeah.
Okay. Commit and do not skip meetings, because it's really tricky. If you skip a month, um, it's really hard to get restarted.
Yeah.
And I think we had to test this theory this year, because there are a lot of challenges with COVID and remote presenting and things like that. But um,
Yeah.
it's important that you commit and don't skip. and get principals on board. This one is our agenda from 2019, March 5th. Oh my gosh, how appropriate. So it was also March. So in this one, we kind of like to chunk things, just like we would chunk for ELs. And so that year I was doing hello in lots of different languages. And so this one's in Arabic. So I'd Google Translate it. That was another strategy we would teach our people. Then there's a strategy in another box. So we practice brain writing. Then we talked about the numbers we have in the district, and we had some new interpreters hired. So that was good to kind of run by the committee, because we keep reminding, parents need to get information in the language they can understand. I have a couple other agendas. These are from 2017, okay? So this must have been the last one, okay? So like I was talking, our learning to share for that month was access test scores. Everybody kind of dug in and started sorting and looking at what their students did that year. They also have a responsibility to put copies of the access score reports in students' CUME files. So that's why they're looking at them, they're analyzing them, and then later on they would put them in the CUME files in the office. So we looked at the score reports. We reminded our committee members what the proficiency criteria were at the time, and how to decide, if the student is ready, if a student is ready for exit. Usually during that year, apparently we were doing fun fact of the month, and that has to do with cultures and languages. Typically, we went over our numbers. Okay, so we had some LEP, ESL, and then literacy students who need literacy. I don't know what that means. I don't really know what that means. I'm like, no, there's no way we have 3,000. Oh, yeah, 328,506 students. Something's wrong there. So another responsibility that we kind of place on our EL committee members is to share the learning from the committee with their colleagues in the buildings. And sometimes they have opportunities to present what they've learned at their professional learning community time, PLC time at the school. Usually it's no longer than 5 minutes, because that is kind of, there's a lot that's going on during PLCT time. But once in a while, they get a chance to kind of share it out with the whole staff. Or since the principal knows that they are EL committee representatives, if there are questions from staff members that come up and, we are not available, they can be a resource on the ground that can support. So that's why it says right here, your turn, okay? We want to hear from you. What topics do you want to explore in the future? Things like that. And a lot of times we ask, be sure to share what you've learned. So that's
great, Irina.
That's basically what we're doing. And, it changes up a little bit depending on the needs. And sometimes I write down on sticky notes some of the issues and topics that I would like to address at the committee. And it just kind of comes up naturally.
Okay. I'm glad you showed us that. It's a good just visual. I think we've covered a lot of everything actually that I wanted to make sure, unless you can think of anything that might help other districts. I think we might have covered.
I think I've explained pretty much everything.
Me too.
Yeah, there are a lot of moving parts, but it will all come together.
Yes, and I'm gonna post this so people might have questions for you when they start creating their own committees.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
I'd be happy to help. Thank you.
Appreciate you taking
I'm
the
glad
time
to share this.
And here we have some highlights from what Irina shared with us. Number 1, use the data you have on Ls. Number of Ls and subgroups that need to be served, access scores, measured progress for Ls to drive your conversations with administrators. Number 2, get principals on board because you will need their support in order to get a representative from all the different schools in the district. Look at using Title III money to pay the members of your committee for their time. Number 4, each school should have a representative who is present at the monthly meetings that run about 45 minutes long. And if they can't attend, they should send a sub. Number 5, a responsibility of the representative is to bring the information back to their school and to be the point person on the ground who others in the school might turn to with L questions. Number 6, teachers and others working directly with Ls are present at meetings. People like literacy coaches, teachers, counselors, speech pathologists, representation from the Indian Ed department, and administration is usually not present. During each committee meeting, she shares an instructional strategy or a resource that supports Ls and makes it a very dynamic part of the meeting. By May meeting, they look at access scores by sorting by school. Each school representative will analyze the data to see who will exit and who is making growth or who isn't making growth. Number 9, they have discussed L programming as a committee and have done self-evaluation regarding the effectiveness of the L program in place. And this would be a great meeting where administration could be invited when you discuss the effectiveness of the LIEP in place in order to monitor it and make sure that the appropriate changes are made. Number 10, it is very important to get commitment from administration and to get principals on board. And that is the end of our highlights. And I want to thank you for watching this multilingual English Learner Educator Spotlight. Thank you to Irina so much for her time and for sharing the efforts that you may replicate at your districts. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to get a hold of me. And thank you so much for watching.